When I tied the knot in that sun-drenched ceremony, I never once breathed a word about the house my grandmother had quietly bequeathed to me, completely paid off, perched defiantly on the ocean's edge, its market value hovering just over $2 million. 3 months after the wedding, my mother-in-law arrived uninvited, flanked by a sharply dressed attorney, and declared with chilling certainty, "This now belongs to the family." She remained blissfully oblivious to the ironclad prenuptial agreement I had meticulously executed months earlier. Hello, Reddit. I'm Julia, 28F, and 3 months ago, I married the man I genuinely believed was my eternal partner, my soulmate in every sense. Our ceremony unfolded modestly beside the sea, waves whispering approval as only our closest companions and immediate relatives looked on. I donned my mother's delicate lace veil, its edges yellowed with time and love. We recited vows we had penned ourselves in quiet midnight hours, and my spouse Ryan, 30M, wept openly the moment he caught sight of me processing down the sandy aisle framed by wildflowers. It seemed utterly flawless. At least, that was the intoxicating sensation in those fleeting moments. One critical detail I withheld from absolutely everyone throughout the entire whirlwind of wedding preparations, not my in-laws, not my closest friends, not even Ryan himself. Prior to her peaceful demise, my grandmother bestowed upon me an extraordinarily cherished gift, her residence. Not merely any dwelling, but a breathtaking oceanfront estate featuring 3 spacious bedrooms, floor-to-ceiling glass panels that drank in the horizon, a deck encircling the entire structure like a protective embrace, and exclusive, gated access to a pristine private beach. Entirely settled financially, appraised at slightly above $2 million. She conveyed it to me discreetly, directly through an irrevocable trust, shielding it from prying eyes. Her parting counsel still echoes in my mind, delivered in hushed tones months before her passing while we sat on that very deck watching the sunset bleed into the sea. People behave differently, sometimes dangerously, when they know what you possess. Safeguard this fiercely, Julia. Let it be your parachute, your ultimate escape. I heeded her wisdom with solemn earnestness, thus refraining from any disclosure. Not because I distrusted Ryan, at least not in those early, rose-tinted days, but because I had witnessed firsthand how his mother, Diane, regarded wealth with a possessive hunger. She once publicly accused a cousin of pilfering the family's sacred legacy simply for refusing to divide lottery proceeds equally among distant relatives. Accordingly, when Ryan and I became engaged under a canopy of stars, I subtly proposed the idea of a prenup, framing it carefully as mutual asset protection for both our futures. Even though he possessed little of tangible value, I kept that observation locked tightly behind my smile. To my quiet astonishment, he consented without resistance or suspicion, almost eagerly. We both affixed our signatures in the presence of witnesses. The document stipulated unequivocally and in precise legal language, all assets owned beforehand, encompassing real estate, trusts, and premarital gifts, shall remain exclusively with the original owner, untouched by marital claims. My attorney, ever thorough, inserted an additional ironclad provision designating any inherited property as explicitly immune from communal title or division absent explicit written consent post-nuptials. 3 months into our matrimony, Ryan had yet to lay eyes on the seaside retreat. I continued remitting property taxes and homeowners association dues from my individual account, a quiet ritual that kept the house breathing independently. I harbored gentle plans for gradual renovations, new paint in soft coastal hues, perhaps updating the kitchen with modern appliances, envisioning it eventually transforming into our occasional sanctuary, a place to escape the city's clamor. Yet, on an otherwise ordinary Friday afternoon, an insistent, almost aggressive knock shattered the calm and tilted my entire world. Diane stood there on the threshold, not alone, but accompanied by a property lawyer whose briefcase screamed intent. Minimal greeting preceded her bold entry. She clutched a thick manila folder and proclaimed without preamble, "Title search completed. It's registered solely to you, but matrimony renders it familial property by default. Ryan had evidently disclosed every detail of the house. "You omitted any mention before the ceremony," she added with a triumphant smirk, as if unearthing contraband. She claimed rightful seizure by divine entitlement. Shock and rage surged through me like an electric current, yet I maintained an exterior of serene composure, a skill honed from years of navigating difficult personalities. I retreated briefly to my home office and retrieved two meticulously organized dossiers. First, the trust documentation proving my grandmother's transfer years prior, exclusively and irrevocably in my name. Second, the notarized prenup with every pertinent section highlighted in precise yellow marker, particularly the clauses governing pre-existing assets. Placing them delicately on the coffee table like evidence in a trial, I advised with measured calm. "Your counsel should review page 7 immediately. This residence predates even our courtship by years. It has never been, nor will it ever be, marital property." The attorney's demeanor shifted abruptly, eyes widening, then narrowing as reality sank in. Diane, however, remained unmoved, squinting with predatory focus and accusing, "This is pure selfishness. This dwelling must benefit the entire clan. Ryan's prospective offspring deserve it. Hoarding something of this magnitude is simply unacceptable." I responded with unwavering evenness. "Diane, this isn't part of your lineage or a legacy. It belonged solely to my grandmother, and she entrusted it to me alone. And if Ryan knew about it, he evidently neglected to mention the prenup's existence when you two concocted your little scheme." She departed in a whirlwind of fury without another retort, heels clicking indignantly against the hardwood. The lawyer offered a curt, tight-lipped nod before hurrying after her. Ryan's reckoning, I knew, loomed inevitably on the horizon. That evening, he returned home significantly delayed, carrying the faint but unmistakable aroma of whiskey, his predictable crutch for moments of acknowledged misdeeds, the liquid courage that loosened tongues and dulled consequences. Jacket discarded carelessly over the couch arm, he remarked with forced casualness, "Mother mentioned her visit today. There was really no need to humiliate her like that in front of her own lawyer." I allowed a heavy silence to settle before posing my question. "Why exactly was your mother conducting title searches on my personal holdings, Ryan?" He stiffened visibly, his gaze evading mine in that telltale way it always did when cornered. "Mere curiosity," he muttered. "She envisioned turning it into a family vacation spot for all of us. That's all." I folded my arms tightly across my chest. "And that's precisely why she showed up with legal representation?" Stammering ensued, defenses crumbling. "You're exaggerating this wildly, Jules. We're married now. What's yours is mine, correct? Isn't that how it works?" That single line ignited an unyielding resolve deep within me. My voice chilled to Arctic precision. "You signed a prenup, Ryan. You knew the implications with absolute clarity. And don't pretend you didn't disclose every detail to her. She knew particulars you claim I never shared." He attempted a nervous laugh to deflect, but guilt flooded his features like a rising tide. Then I posed the question that struck deepest. "Did you give her a key to my house?" Silence, deafening, damning. Later that night, I inspected the small combination safe tucked in my study where I stored spare house keys alongside important documents. One complete set was conspicuously absent. Dawn the next morning found me driving to the property, heart pounding with foreboding. Initial inspection revealed everything outwardly normal, furniture undisturbed, windows secure, but when I accessed the security system's cloud backup, I froze in horror. There she was, Diane, touring the house just 3 days prior, her lawyer striding confidently beside her, Ryan trailing like a shadow. She gestured proprietarily at walls and fixtures. "We'll demolish this partition here, open up the entire living space for better flow," she declared on camera. "Once it's transferred into our family trust, we'll remodel completely, modernize everything. My son deserves a proper coastal elegance, a legacy home." And Ryan, he didn't argue, didn't protest. He merely nodded in silent acquiescence. Nausea overwhelmed me in waves. They had already been premeditating appropriation, masking it as a benevolent communal gesture, thwarted only by binding legal documents. Thus, their fallback: coerce me into voluntarily amending the deed to include his name. That night, when Ryan returned, I didn't utter a single word. I simply cued the footage on the large screen and let the evidence speak. Pallor spread across his face like frost. "Julia, please, I didn't mean," I interrupted sharply. "You trespassed with accomplices on my property. Do you even comprehend the legal ramifications?" He reached desperately for my hand. I retreated a step. "You shattered my trust for a maternal delusion she planted in your head. And you think this marriage can still stand on such ruins?" He tried to formulate a response, but I was already striding toward the door. "Go stay with your mother," I said quietly, voice steady as steel. "You two clearly have ample plotting left to do together." That same night, I contacted my attorney. We began fortifying defenses that extended far beyond the mere structure: emotional, legal, financial. A fortnight later, an official letter arrived from the county clerk's office. Diane had audaciously petitioned for joint ownership, alleging the beach house constituted a concealed marital asset, accusing me of fraud via intentional nondisclosure, and demanding the court correct the record by adding Ryan's name to the deed. The sheer audacity stunned me anew. She wasn't merely overstepping anymore. She was attempting to rewrite history itself. My lawyer, Marissa, remained calm as a summer sea when we met in her sunlit office overlooking the city. "Julia, relax. This claim is feeble at best. They have zero legal standing, though it will get messy in the public eye." She produced the file I'd provided. Trust papers dated 3 full years before my marriage, prenup bearing Ryan's unmistakable signature. "We'll counterfile for immediate dismissal," she stated. "But since they've gone public, we might as well make the rebuttal official and airtight." 2 weeks later, we entered the courthouse. Ryan and Diane were already seated, aligned like a united front. Diane wore her signature pearls and that smug, entitlement-dripping smile. Ryan refused to meet my gaze. The judge perused the filings methodically. "So, Mrs. Sanders asserts this house is marital property. Mrs. Cooper," he turned to me, "you contest this, correct?" Marissa rose confidently. "Your Honor, the property was transferred via irrevocable trust to my client 3 years prior to her marriage. The plaintiff's claim is not only baseless, but verges on harassment. We submit the original deed and notarized prenup for the record." Diane's lawyer attempted objection. Her husband was unaware of the property during marriage discussions. This constitutes concealment and fraud. Marissa didn't miss a beat. "Your Honor, concealment doctrine applies solely to shared assets acquired during the marriage. This is emphatically not one. Furthermore, the husband signed a prenuptial agreement explicitly acknowledging that any property owned prior to marriage remains the separate, untouchable property of its original owner." She handed over pristine copies. The judge read intently, then slowly fixed his gaze on Ryan. "Mr. Sanders, is this your signature?" A hesitant nod. "Yes, Your Honor." "Then why precisely is your mother filing a claim on your behalf?" That's when Diane jumped in uninvited, voice shrill. "Because he was manipulated. That house should belong to both of them. He's her husband. For heaven's sake." The judge raised a stern eyebrow. "Ma'am, unless you are an attorney of record, I strongly suggest you refrain from speaking out of turn." Laughter rippled through the courtroom like a wave. Diane turned crimson with humiliation. The judge finally declared, "Case dismissed with prejudice. The property is solely owned by Mrs. Cooper. The plaintiffs are ordered to pay all legal fees and court costs related to this frivolous filing." The gavel's crack was pure, delicious vindication. Diane's lawyer looked mortified. Ryan sat frozen, defeated. But Marissa leaned in and whispered, "We can file for restraining order if she tries again. We have the trespassing video evidence, your call." I smiled, resolve hardening. Do it. Because now it wasn't just about the house. It was about etching a boundary in stone that would never be crossed again. In the hallway post-hearing, Diane hissed venomously, "You'll regret humiliating me like that in public." I turned to her with icy calm. You're the one who humiliated yourself, Diane, on a public record. And the next time you set foot on my property, it won't be a civil court you face. It'll be criminal charges. She had no response, only a glare that could curdle milk. But the real, gut-punch surprise arrived that very evening. Ryan showed up on my doorstep, now the beach house doorstep, where I had relocated, with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, looking nothing like the confident groom who once stood beside me at the altar. His tie was missing, shirt half-buttoned and rumpled, panic flickering wildly in his eyes. He shifted nervously from foot to foot. "Jules, please. I just need to talk. I made a terrible mistake." I didn't open the security gate fully. Behind me, the rhythmic crash of waves filled the heavy silence. "You didn't make a mistake, Ryan. You made a calculated series of choices that all led inexorably here." He tried to step closer. "I was under immense pressure," Mom said. I cut him off sharply. "Your mother doesn't control this house. Or me. Or you, unless you keep letting her puppeteer your life." He exhaled, suddenly looking small and diminished. "She's furious. She said I ruined the family's chance at a real legacy. She kicked me out." I almost laughed at the irony. Diane's twisted idea of family legacy was anything she could seize and control. "So now you're here because she evicted you?" I said, "not because you finally realized the depth of betrayal you inflicted on me." He stared at the ground, voice cracking. "I miss you, Jules. I can fix this. I'll make it up to you, I swear." I hesitated for a heartbeat, then cracked the door just enough for him to glimpse the interior. The living room bathed in warm golden light, moving boxes half unpacked with my new life, my grandmother's cherished quilt draped lovingly over the couch, and sitting there quietly sipping chamomile tea was Marissa, my lawyer. She turned, offered a polite nod, and said with professional smoothness, "Evening, Mr. Sanders. I assume you're here to sign the final dissolution papers." Ryan's mouth fell open in shock. "You already filed?" I confirmed softly, "Last week. You'll receive your copy tomorrow via certified mail." He swallowed hard, voice breaking. "So that's it? You're just done?" "You tried to steal my grandmother's home, Ryan. You enabled your mother to trespass, to lie under oath in court. I'm not punishing you. I'm protecting myself, my legacy, my peace." He began to cry, quiet, desperate tears that might have moved me months ago, but I had already made peace with the irrevocable loss. Love cannot survive where respect has been obliterated. I nodded toward the gate. "There's a decent hotel down the coastal road. They won't ask questions. Goodbye, Ryan." When the door closed with finality, I leaned against it for a long, cathartic moment. Marissa handed me the signed court confirmation, restraining order approved and in effect. Diane was barred from coming within 100 feet of the property or me. Outside, the tide was rising steadily. Moonlight danced on the ocean exactly as it had the night my grandmother pressed that key into my palm with trembling hands. I stepped onto the porch, inhaling deeply the briny salt air. For the first time in months, it didn't carry the metallic tang of fear. It smelled purely, intoxicatingly, of freedom. People act differently, sometimes monstrously, when they know what you have. Grandma had been prophetic. And now I finally understood the unspoken second half of her wisdom. When you stop contorting yourself to make others comfortable at your own expense, that's when true, unassailable peace begins. Ryan eventually moved back in with Diane permanently. They sold her modest suburban house 6 months later just to cover the crushing court fees and legal penalties. I never heard from either of them again. Radio silence, blessed and permanent. As for me, I stayed rooted in the beach house. I renovated Grandma's homeroom by room with loving intention, turned her old study into a sunlit art studio where I paint seascapes at dawn, transformed the guest suite into a charming rental for travelers who crave waking to the symphony of waves. Some days, I still reflect on how perilously close I came to losing everything, not due to misfortune or bad luck, but because I extended trust to people who proved unworthy of it. Now, I no longer hide what I have. I simply ensure it is protected, legally, emotionally, fiercely. The ocean keeps its rhythms. The sun rises over the horizon each morning, and I stand on my deck knowing the parachute Grandma gave me isn't just a house. It's sovereignty.